Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and these are my start-sit decisions for Week 13, Thanksgiving, and Black Friday, all 4 games before the weekend. So only 4 games in this video, but some valuable information. I think weather's going to be a big factor, and we have 2 of the only 4 dome games this week on Thursday. So you may want to capitalize and avoid some wind and rain on Sunday. So let us begin. First game on Thursday is Detroit hosting the Packers. The Lions always host a Thanksgiving matchup, and they're not that successful. They're 1-3 in Dan Campbell's tenure with Detroit on Thanksgiving. So they also lost to the Packers 2 years ago on Thanksgiving. They lost in week 1 to Green Bay. Last year they did sweep them. And this game has a lot of playoff implications, whether it's for the division or for the better wildcard seed if neither team can catch the Bears. But when it comes to the most obvious start of the week, Gibbs is the RB1. This matchup against Green Bay ranks bottom 10, but if you look a little closer, in the last month, they actually are giving up top 10 numbers to the running back position. So even though they held Gibbs in check in week 1 to under 2.5 yards per carry, perhaps they wake up. Based on the last month, that is not a bet I would like to make. But Gibbs did go crazy on Sunday. Given the short week, it's possible he doesn't get 30-plus touches back-to-back with only 3 days rest. So I expect Gibbs to still be elite. I'm not benching him, but perhaps he does fall back down a little bit against Green Bay, given how much they leaned on him against the Giants and also considering how bad he played back in week 1 against these Packers. So a weird matchup here, but obviously I'm starting Jahmyr Gibbs, and I do trust Amon-Ra St. Brown considerably as well. If you look a little closer, though, this Packers matchup for wide receivers also ranks bottom 10, but it couldn't be the exact opposite from the upgrade that it has been for running backs in the last month. For wide receivers, Green Bay actually ranks dead last against the position over the last month. So I'm still going to trust Amon-Ra. I think in this matchup, a touchdown is pretty guaranteed. He's usually a lock for at least 1 touchdown. So let's keep starting Amon-Ra. And then Josh Jacobs, I assume will play. He did not on Sunday, but given the short week, I expected that to kind of factor into their decision. He was limited on Thursday, Friday last week. And then on Tuesday, as I'm recording this, he was practicing today again. So I think he'll be fine. I think he will play. This game is way more important in terms of division playoff tiebreakers. And Jacobs, I think, was just being saved for this Lions game. So I would start Jacobs, definitely ranking him at top 10. I would acknowledge the matchup's bad, ranks bottom 2. The Lions are one of the most difficult running back matchups on the season. But I kind of don't care. With Jacobs in division, I expect them to lean on him, and I expect a touchdown, even if the efficiency is kind of slim. So let's still lean on Jacobs. As long as he's active, I will start him. But this start decision on Emmanuel Wilson is obviously contingent on Jacobs' health. Emmanuel Wilson gets the asterisk in this category because if Jacobs doesn't play, I would absolutely endorse him. Last week, the volume was there, 2 touchdowns, a phenomenal game. I was too low on Wilson last week in the ranks, so I wouldn't want to sleep on him. The matchup's bad, but I think he would be a top 20 play. Regardless, based on volume, I would start him, but that's all dependent on Jacobs' status. So assuming Jacobs is active, then no, I would be benching Emmanuel Wilson. I would not rank him as a start. It all depends on Jacobs' health. So monitor that. Hopefully you handcuffed Jacobs to Wilson. If not, if you started Wilson last week, good for you. A phenomenal week-winning flex play. You got off the wire. But in terms of flex plays, I still don't really trust Jordan Love. There's also a question about his shoulder health. Apparently he's handing it off strictly with his right hand, or maybe I'm mixing it up. Apparently the left shoulder is not healthy enough to use on handoff. So that is going to impact him a little bit. Last week he barely threw the ball at all. And maybe it was just the game plan. This matchup, though, is so much better against Detroit. It ranks tied for 6th. And we just saw Jameis Winston have the game of his life. So I'm not expecting a touchdown reception from Jordan Love, but in terms of upgrades this year, the Lions are a great matchup. I do like the Lions opponent at quarterback generally in fantasy. So I do like him as a solid super flex play, but only in the teens in my rankings. I don't think I'll upgrade him high enough. The passing game in Green Bay is just weird. And although Christian Watson offers some upside, he doesn't have enough volume to really trust to translate into fantasy points that also give Love a lot of upside. It's all dependent on touchdowns, and I'm not convinced they'll hit, but if one of these players has a Wan'Dale Robinson type of game, it could be Watson. It could also be Jayden Reed, who I expect to play. He was limited on practice on Friday, didn't play against the Vikings, but they've been holding him out a little longer than expected, and I expect he will be back on Thursday against Detroit. So I could see their offense start really playing well. They could fire on all cylinders if Reed and Watson at full strength. However, given it's his first game back, I would probably be a bit tentative to fully endorse Jayden Reed. But I think he will crack my top 40. I think he's a legit flex play. I'm stashing him in the subscriber league, and I noticed his roster percentage is actually kind of lower than I would have thought. I think a lot of people dropped him and haven't woken up to him coming back since he went on IR. So a good pickup this week on the wire if he's still available. I think he will be involved, and he does have the best comfort level, I would say, with Jordan Love. I'd say the most production we've seen from a Love wide receiver in Green Bay is Jayden Reed when healthy. Even week 1 when he was kind of banged up, not 100%, he did score a touchdown, and I could see him instantly give that offense a big spark. So I like Jayden Reed, but I wouldn't rank him higher than Watson, probably back-to-back going into this matchup. The matchup is good. Tied for 7th. The Lions are not a secondary, I fear. They've also had a lot of injuries. They could give up a lot of yards here. So I like Jayden Reed's upside, but probably going to be a low-end bench stash. I'm keeping him on my IR. I doubt I'll play him on Thursday. I'm also getting Marion Hampton back, so I think I'll flex Hampton. That's my personal situation. Maybe you don't have that luxury. So Jayden Reed, an interesting flex play this week, but I'd rather wait and see. Jared Goff, though, I do not trust this week. With Laporta on IR, I think the upside for Goff is pretty diminished. It's all going to be contingent on Jameson Williams' upside. And although Gibbs really contributed in the passing game last week, that's not a guarantee, but it's most likely going to help him. So he's a flex play. The Lions played really poorly back in week 1 against the Packers, and it's a bottom 3 matchup on the season. They really shut down McCarthy last week. So I don't think Goff is a safe start, but in Superflex, this game does have shootout potential, and the Lions offense is still pretty tempting. Knowing that Gibbs had the most uptick in targets last week after Laporta went down does help Goff in the upside department. A touchdown in the passing game for Gibbs is way more valuable when it translates to Goff. So good luck with him, but I'm a bit worried. This matchup is a big downgrade. I'd probably rather bench him. Only in a deeper Superflex league would I do it. And then David Montgomery is a big gamble this week because the Packers do have a good run defense on the year. They held him to under 2.5 yards per carry in week 1. And last week, I thought he would be heavily involved against the Giants in a great matchup, and he just wasn't. He was an afterthought to Jahmyr Gibbs. So Dan Campbell starting to move away from him. I think he's a very low-end flex, but if there is one upgrade in terms of the Packers matchup lately, it is against running back. They do rank top 10 in terms of upgrades. So I could see him pay off a low-end flex play, but only because it's a dome game would I give him a tiebreaker against a running back I rank inside the top 25. Odds are I'd probably keep Montgomery as a low-end flex play, but a player that is so boom bust now is back to the embarrassing tier, the bottom tier in the flex section here. Pretty risky, and odds are I'd rather not feel comfortable to do it. It's a bit cramped in there for a reason. Not ideal to start JMO, because last week I thought he'd have a lot more targets. With no Laporta, it felt obvious he'd be a good start, but nope, even in a good matchup against the Giants, he put up a bagel, and he's just so unsafe. The upside's elite, but it's just so hard to know what you're going to get. I would most likely bench him because unlike the running back matchup in the last 4 games, the wide receiver matchup is dead last, but maybe McCarthy with the Vikings played a big role last week, but the trends are bad. The Packers secondary starting to step up. I could see JMO shit the bed again. So that's where the Packers defense, I think, is my interesting long shot here. They really shut him down in week 1. They were a solid floor play back then. I could see it happen, but on paper, you don't want to start a defense against Detroit. So odds are I'm going to bench him. I have them and the Eagles in the subscriber league, and I'm definitely going Philly against Chicago over Green Bay in my lineup this week. But given some injuries at Detroit, I think Isaac Tesla has an interesting ceiling in this matchup because Laporta is on IR. Brock Wright has not practiced. He's the replacement, so that could lead to 6 targets going elsewhere, or maybe just a red zone target going elsewhere. Khalif Raymond has also not practiced either, so we're looking at real scrubs in terms of depth chart pieces at wide receiver. Odds are if any volume was going to go to Khalif Raymond or Brock Wright, and they're not going to play, it's going to go to Jameson Williams. Odds are that's where it's going. But if you told me it doesn't, if you told me on the goal line they need someone to score a touchdown, I would assume Isaac Tesla might factor in to the game plan this week. So he's my long shot. I wouldn't feel safe doing it, but at some point he will play well, and he has scored on the goal line in previous times this year. So my long shot is very, very risky. It doesn't compare to the Packers in terms of floor plays, but Tesla could be valuable this week and down the stretch if all these other injuries still factor in. But the Lions defense, kind of tempting because Jordan Love isn't trustworthy, but assuming Jacobs and Jaden Reed are back, I do see a lot of upside with the Packers offense coming back to them, and that's where I think I'm going to pass. The Lions defense, I don't think is safe. They almost lost to Jameis Winston. Winston had well over 300 yards and played lights out against the Lions last week. So no thank you with the Detroit defense. I think it's a little too risky for my taste. But Romeo Doubs, I would bench now that Jaden Reed is back. I think it's too unsafe. I don't think it's safe at all. So no thank you with Romeo Doubs. Very touchdown dependent, not enough volume. And then Dontavian Wicks gets relegated to the bench if Reed comes back, so fuck that. And then Luke Musgrave, really not trustworthy, not emerging as the guy. So not going to start him. And then last player in Green Bay, not even sure if he suits up. It's Matthew Golden, who did not play last week. If Jaden Reed is back, no effing chance I'm trusting Golden. I don't trust him as much as Dobbs, and I already told you to bench Dobbs. So that's it for those start-sit decisions in the Packers-Lions game. A fun one. I think it could be really high scoring, honestly. The Lions, I think, are a terrible start at defense. The Packers probably burn you as well. But let's move on. Let's talk about the next game. The Cowboys are hosting Kansas City, and after last week against the defense like the Eagles, no effing chance I am benching Dak Prescott. I could see a big shootout here at home on Thanksgiving. I think the Cowboys are going to play really well. I know that's the Chiefs defense, and sometimes they really limit their opponent. Like last week, they held the Colts to just 20 points. The Chiefs are not quite the same on the road. And if you look at the season-long stats, they rank 19th against the position. So the Chiefs are a neutral matchup, given how George Pickens is playing and CeeDee Lamb, always a trustworthy option. I trust Dak Prescott. I am not benching Dak Prescott. If anything, against Mahomes, it's a big shootout, not a low-scoring game. So not expecting a ton of defense this week. On Thanksgiving, I would trust Dak Prescott. But Mahomes, I think, will score touchdowns. That was what was missing against the Colts last week. And although he had some picks, they still won the game, and he will put up a good fight. But I do think the Cowboys will win this game. I could see a turnover be a problem for Mahomes, but I still trust him a decent amount. He still has tremendous upside this year. And in this marquee matchup, I don't trust the Cowboys secondary. Their run defense is getting better, but I expect Mahomes to rack up the yardage. So start Mahomes for sure, and I'm definitely starting his top weapon. The Cowboys secondary has been ass. Like, even with some pieces coming back at linebacker, and since the trade deadline, they've played much better on defense, but it's not the secondary that's doing the heavy lifting. Last week, A.J. Brown started off pretty hot. Rashee Rice had a tougher matchup last week and did really well with it. Didn't score a touchdown, but went well over 100 yards with a lot of yak. So trusting Rashee Rice, I only downgraded him to number 12 last week. He is automatically in the top 10 against Dallas. He might be top 3. He literally has that upside. I think he'll have the most value in this game. But George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb are right behind him. At the moment, you kind of prefer having George Pickens. Pickens is playing better. He's not dropping passes as much. And given it's a contract year, I don't think he's going to be slipping up. He's playing very disciplined, and he looks like a great asset. This is the best wide receiver duo in the league right now. So I'm not going to bench Pickens. I ranked him top 10 last week. That is going to continue. If anything, I think I'll rank him back to back with Lamb around wide receivers 4 and 5. The matchup is not good against the Chiefs, but I kind of just don't give a shit. Lamb is still matchup proof, and he hopefully doesn't drop 3 passes again, but even with that, you're going to get at least one deep shot to click, and odds are you will get a touchdown. I expect him to bounce back and get back in the end zone. So both are automatic starts, but I am kind of tempted to rank Pickens above Lamb this week. The matchup is not as difficult. He will not draw Trent McDuffie as often as CeeDee Lamb, but you're starting all 3 receivers, no-brainers, Lamb, Pickens, and Rice. Gotta be in your lineup. But Travis Kelce, I would start. This Cowboys matchup is a primetime game, and Kelce always shows up in big games. He's not the most consistent option, but he's definitely not washed, and he is still giving you some good games this year. So last week, they didn't score any passing touchdowns. I think that's kind of a fluke. Against the Cowboys, that will change, and it's not a big downgrade. The Cowboys are so bad elsewhere, but they're not going to have an answer for Kelce. So let's start him. I'm going to trust him in the top 10. Let's consistently keep starting Travis Kelce. But if you look at this matchup for Jake Ferguson, it does rank bottom 10, but we have an asterisk next to Kansas City as the 24th ranked defense versus tight end. If you look a little closer, the Chiefs have actually allowed top 8 numbers to the position in the last month. They are trending much better against that spot. And last week, the touchdown actually went to the backup tight end. It did not go to Tyler Warren. So maybe that happens again. But odds are Jake Ferguson will get the volume. He's running enough routes to keep anyone else off the field at that position. And even in a bad matchup last week against Philly, he did show up and play well. So I trust Jake Ferguson. I trust Dak Prescott. And if there's any upgrade right now for any position against the Chiefs, it is actually tight end when they go up against them. So I'm going to start Jake Ferguson, always a top 10 play, definitely going to keep him in my lineup. And based on how the Cowboys offense goes, it's kind of just 4 guys that you trust other than Dak. The playmakers are very obvious, and they're not really giving up much volume to other back-end options. And that's definitely the case with Javonte Williams. The matchup is terrible, though. Against the Chiefs, it's bottom 6 on the year. And if you look closer, they're actually much more difficult lately. So last week, they were lights out at defending Jonathan Taylor. Javonte, I don't consider in the same class as Jonathan Taylor, but based on the expected volume, I'm still going to start Javonte Williams. There's no way I'm ranking him outside of my top 16, but I'm not expecting him to be top 10. I don't think he'll be a lock in the top 10, given this matchup is pretty gross. So a touchdown will be a bit tricky, but odds are this game is high scoring enough. There's enough to go around. I would still trust the volume on Javonte Williams. But Xavier Worthy's really a big gamble this year. Not living up to expectation, very rarely paying off in your lineup. If you trust him, you usually lose because of him. So this is the only matchup where I think you have to start him. The Cowboys have just been so vulnerable in the secondary this year. And although in the last month they're getting a bit better at defending receivers, it still ranks top 10. It's still a good matchup. And the overall points that they allow are kind of the same. It's just other teams have gotten noticeably worse than Dallas in the last month. So there's still a big upgrade. For that reason, I think Mahomes will play lights out and chuck it down the field. There's going to be a deep shot in this game, and odds are Worthy is due for one massive blow-up. If you're telling me he has one great game this year, it's probably against the bad Cowboys secondary. So no Trayvon Diggs to worry about. Deron Bland will be occupied against Rashee Rice most of the game. Worthy could slip past them. Wouldn't be shocked at all if it happens. So this is the week where I'm going to be ranking him higher than typical, but he's lost a lot of my faith. I understand if you don't want to get burned with Worthy yet again. But interesting situation at running back. Isaiah Pacheco is off the injury report. He was limited last week, but they were just gauging his health status. And although they leaned crazy on Kareem Hunt last week, it does look like Pacheco will get his job back. But Hunt played really well, and he has been the better touchdown producer. So I think they're both actual flex plays this week. Hunt, I do think is going to be less involved, though. His volume was just insane. At his age, you're not going to get 30 touches at running back most of the time. So given it's a short rest, I think with Pacheco healthy, they're not going to use Hunt in the same way. I think Pacheco will get more volume. So I will be ranking Pacheco higher, but I could understand even with more volume, he still doesn't have the better fantasy game. I still think Kareem Hunt will be rewarded with a relied upon goal line role. He is not going away on the goal line. He's been better in that department than Pacheco for 2 years now. So Hunt, I think, is still an interesting flex spot. Last week was just so insanely productive against the Colts. Also, that was not expected. So Hunt has really proved himself. I don't think he's going away, but given his age and the short rest off such an avalanche of touches, I expect Pacheco to be more valuable this week. So good luck there. It'll be a rotation with probably limited upside, but could score a touchdown. The Cowboys are a good matchup this year, but if you look closer, since their defense has gotten better off the bye, they actually rank bottom 12. They rank 21st in terms of running back matchups. So not as easy if you look a little closer in recent history. But my long shot for this game is the Cowboys defense. Like I just mentioned, they are getting a bit better lately. And it's not like the Chiefs have been super elite on offense. Like last week they won. Worthy fumbled the ball and the defender almost scored a touchdown. If that didn't happen, they would have lost the game. I could see some mistakes again from the Chiefs. They're just not the same team on the road this year. Their defense doesn't quite show up, and their offense has been very inconsistent overall week to week. So I think the Cowboys are playing lights out at the moment. If you're really watching them, they have some athletes that are showing up for Marshawn Kneeland, among other factors. They have a lot of discipline. They're really stepping up, and they're looking so much better than they used to. So the Chiefs, I would start all their pieces on offense. I could also see them force some turnovers, though, and provide some upside for Dallas. I'm probably benching them, but they are my long shot, and I do want to keep an eye out on them on the wire. I do think they're an interesting stash. In the fantasy playoffs, they get J.J. McCarthy at home week 15, then the Chargers' terrible O-line at home week 16, and then on week 17, they're on the road at the Commanders. And that's probably Mariota. In week 18, if you're still playing, they're at the Giants. Not a matchup that scares you. So Dallas playing well enough. They get Detroit next week, though. They're just a stash for the playoffs, but might have value down the line. But my long shot for the Chiefs is Hollywood Brown. I see some legit upside for the receivers. I'm ranking Worthy higher this week, so Hollywood could also be the guy instead. It wouldn't shock me at all if Hollywood had 2 touchdowns against the Cowboys. Typically, you want to upgrade receivers against Dallas this year. So an interesting play, but very risky. I think I would only gamble on Xavier Worthy. But against Dak Prescott and the Cowboys defense, I'm going to be benching the Kansas City Chiefs on defense. I do not trust the matchup here. If anything, this game is a shootout, not a low-scoring game. So let's avoid that. The Cowboys are also not really turning it over too often, so I'll pass. The Chiefs are not playing as good this year. And on the road, they're just not as good compared to at home. So let's avoid Kansas City if we can. The Cowboys offense does scare me, but Juju, pretty risky. Good matchup, but I'm only going to gamble on Hollywood if I'm testing a third string receiver. And then Tyquan Thornton, same situation. No chance. I'll start him. But Flournoy could be involved. I could see the Chiefs secondary limit Lamb a little bit, and maybe one of these backups does have to contribute. Flournoy has been more involved consistently than Jalen Tolbert, but Kevontae Turpin was questionable in practice. He was limited, so maybe won't play, but he's an all-or-nothing play. Need a house call, and odds are you don't get it. But Malik Davis did overtake Jaden Blue last week in the backfield, so he's the backup to Javonte, but not going to start him. That is for sure. But Noah Gray did not practice this week. I believe he has a concussion, so that might help the volume for Travis Kelce this week. Definitely cannot start Noah Gray. And then Brashard Smith with Pacheco coming back is a no-brainer. Got to keep him on the waiver wire. Not even interested at all. But those are my start sits for the Cowboys. We're keeping the Cowboys offense entirely in our lineup. I'm considering a stash of their defense, but not going to start them against the Chiefs. And then for the Chiefs, we're going Mahomes, Rice, and Kelce. Worthy is an interesting upside swing. So are the running backs, but odds are I would only flex them if I was desperate. Not feeling too safe with those Chiefs options. But let's move on. We got 2 more games left. And on Thanksgiving evening, we have the Ravens hosting Cincinnati. And this is the first game where weather is a factor. It's going to be cold in Baltimore on Thursday night. 37 degrees with a little wind, 12 miles per hour. is the forecast. So not enough to really impact you, but could lead to some tense bodies. Winter is creeping in quickly now, and sometimes that does affect some offenses. So maybe the teams have to lean on the run. It could help the defenses out, but in general, I feel pretty safe with the big playmakers on both teams, especially when you factor in Jamar Chase is returning from suspension. He'll be extra hungry to play well. In primetime, they got embarrassed by the Broncos. In their next primetime game, they completely lit up the Steelers. I think in primetime, they'll be very motivated with their season on the line, essentially. If they don't win against the Ravens this week, there is no chance they catch them in this division, which is still up for grabs. Their only path to make the playoffs at this point, I think, is through the division. I do not expect them to be a wildcard team, given they have 8 losses. But there's still 6 weeks left. They can run the table, and that is what they're hoping to do. Jamar Chase will be the focal point of the offense because T. Higgins is out with a concussion. Given they're playing on Thursday, he will not clear in time. T. Higgins will not play. So Jamar Chase going to probably get 19 targets, 20 plus is possible. At least 15. That's my projection for Jamar Chase. So he'll be my wide receiver 1. I know the Ravens secondary is a little bit better lately, but on the year, it's a good matchup. And there have been some injuries in the secondary lately. There's a chance that they are not 100% on defense this week in Baltimore. But the main big reason to upgrade him is because Joe Burrow is expected back. He was full in practice last week. They held him out. And because they're playing on Thanksgiving, I think that was wise. They have to win this division. The division tiebreakers are so much more important. So I understand them holding him out with no T. Higgins last week. It kind of made sense. They would probably still lose to the Patriots. But Burrow has a legit shot. I think this game is a toss-up. If he's active, I would start him. We've been waiting for a while. And although the Ravens defense is pretty good lately, they're actually a bottom 3 matchup. I just don't care. With Burrow healthy, he's one of those matchup-proof guys. It's a primetime game with the season on the line. It might be an ugly game, but I trust that Burrow will have at least 2 passing touchdowns and probably play well enough to get the win. I did pick Cincy to get the job done and get a W against the Ravens. The Ravens defense, though, is scary. I could see it blow up in your face and be the wrong call, but if you've been waiting this long and you've been piecing it together with backups, odds are I'm going to be ranking Burrow higher than whoever you got. So I would start him personally. I think he's still top 5. Rest of season, I don't think there's that many more valuable quarterbacks than Joe Burrow in terms of upside. But Lamar Jackson is questionable, did not practice Monday, but that was a walkthrough. He was back on Tuesday. And although he's not 100%, I would still probably start him. The Bengals are the second best matchup, and I think this game is more likely a shootout on Thanksgiving because the Bengals defense just cannot stop anyone. And although the Ravens defense shows up at times, I think this game is a barn burner back and forth between Lamar and Burrow. So his rushing stats are not quite amazing at the moment, so that does cap his upside. I think Burrow will have more value this week, not going to lie, but the matchup is so good, I'm definitely not going to downgrade Lamar enough to bench him. He will definitely be ranked top 10, but last week I had him at number 6. The week before that, I had him at, I believe, number 12, and I don't feel too good about him being top 5. Even in this matchup, he's not playing up to speed, up to what we expect. So probably not ranking him outside the top 8, but I don't know how he will play. Not expecting many rushing stats from Lamar this week. But Andrews gets the best tight end matchup on the year. Last week, Hunter Henry went off, so I'm definitely starting Andrews. He's, I think, a lock in the top 10 still at this point in his career. But Derrick Henry gets the best matchup on paper. The running back position thrives. Such a elite rate this year for running backs against the Bengals. They have such a bad defense. And Henry is scoring touchdowns really consistently. So as Lamar doesn't run it as much, Henry is a bit more of a focal point, especially in the red zone. I trust Henry to get some touchdowns here. So although it's not the best matchup last month, it's down to number 7. That's still top 10, still a big upgrade, no doubt about it. Henry is in the lineup. But I think Chase Brown, despite this bad matchup, is also in the lineup. With no T. Higgins, he will probably get 8+ targets from Joe Burrow. As long as Burrow is the quarterback, I think Chase Brown returns to that top 10 running back that we drafted, and I consider his upside truly elite. I think his floor is bust proof, especially if you have him in full PPR. The volume is going to be insane in the target distribution. I could see literally 8 targets this week for Chase Brown, if not 10 plus. I love him in this matchup, but I would like to acknowledge this 14 on the year in terms of their ranking for Baltimore that's neutral is a lie if you look at just the last month. Since the bye week, they've been so much better on defense. They actually rank bottom 3. They are the 3rd worst matchup for running backs. But I consider Burrow matchup proof, and with T. Higgins out, especially this week, that really does translate to Chase Brown in the passing game. So lock in the lineup. I'm 100% endorsing Chase Brown, but I would probably expect Derrick Henry to have more value in half PPR. I expect more touchdowns for Henry in this game. But Zay Flowers, I would start. He's been so consistently safe, pretty bust-proof this year. Last week, he did go over 60 total yards yet again. And against the Bengals, I'm expecting a bit of a shootout. So still not sure if Rashad Bateman is going to return. Bateman is inactive last 2 games, and that's locking in the volume for Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews. There is no other receiver I would trust in Baltimore other than Flowers. So got to start them. I think this game is pretty high scoring. So I think all of these guys are going over double digits, and especially guys like Andrews and Derrick Henry, trust them to find the end zone. I definitely would bet on a touchdown for Andrews and Henry this week against Cincy. But Andre Yoshivas, very tempting this week, had a solid performance last week against the Patriots. T. Higgins' concussion played a factor, but still, I think he'll be a go-to target in this offense with no T. Higgins. Very reliable target share, given he'll be running the most routes behind Jamar Chase. So he's going to be on the field with Burrow. That is a player I want to be starting, but probably not going to rank him top 20. I'm not going to go overboard. This Ravens matchup is a bit more tricky as of late. Ranked 17th in the last month as opposed to top 7 on the year. They started off so garbage in September. They're still top 10 on the year, but Yoshi just gets an upgrade because of Burrow. You got to trust some pass catchers with Burrow, and T. Higgins is out. So Yoshivas, some high-end upside this week, solid value, legit flex play, probably top 35 in the ranks. And then Mike Gesicki, I think, will be a very legit flex play if you're looking for a streaming tight end, which has been a tough position as of late. There's good depth week to week, but the names change. There's a big rotation once you exit the top 8 at tight end. So Gesicki did come back to the lineup last week, was healthy enough, and did outperform Noah Fant. With Joe Burrow healthy, I do see legit upside. Last season, Gesicki was averaging about 12 points per game when T. Higgins was inactive. So I would expect a similar target distribution. They pay Gesicki much more than Fant. He's the guy with the best chemistry with Burrow. So I do consider Gesicki a good plug and play, but long-term pickup, I don't think he has much value. So understandable to leave him on the wire. But if you're just streaming the position and you drop guys every single week, Gesicki is one of the names I would pick up off the waiver wire. But Isaiah Likely, I do not trust in Baltimore. The matchup is amazing against Cincinnati, though, so very tempted. I almost made him my long shot. Not going to lie, I almost put Isaiah Likely as my long shot candidate, but I just don't trust him. I really don't trust the volume, and they're not looking the same this year on offense. So I just haven't seen enough from Likely, although the matchup could really prove well. I view him like Austin Hooper last week. Like, yeah, it's possible, but even if it happens, I think it's too cute. He might be the second most productive receiver in Baltimore, though. This week against the Bengals, tight ends go nuclear. So it's possible. I think in DFS, it's much more exciting, but in redraft, I think I'll pass. I'm only going to trust Mark Andrews. But Justice Hill, I don't think is really involved anymore. He's been banged up and maybe they're stashing him, but last week he had a bagel. Keaton Mitchell was the guy. So I think Keaton Mitchell is the main long shot candidate. This Bengals matchup is also elite for running backs, not just tight ends. So I could only put one Raven in this long shot territory. I decided on Keaton Mitchell, but honestly, I think Likely is more valuable than my Bengals long shot. I have Jermaine Burton here, and honestly, this is just because of all of my best ball shares in the summer, where I drafted Burton at about an 8% rate. I thought Burton might emerge above Yoshibis. But T. Higgins is out. It's possible. You never know. The Ravens secondary could really shut down Yoshi or Chase, hypothetically. And maybe Burton finally has a breakout game, but I wouldn't trust it. I think this is asking to lose if you start Jermaine Burton. But Noah Fant did get relegated behind Gesicki last week, so got to bench him. And then Taj Brooks isn't going to play. Samaje Perine has been banged up. He is returning, so he is the backup behind Chase Brown, but not going to start him. Bad matchup, and I only trust Chase Brown in this backfield. So no thank you with him. I mentioned T. Higgins is out multiple times, so can't start him with a concussion. And then Bateman has missed the last 2 games. I don't expect Bateman to play on Thursday. But this game, I think, is a shootout. In general, the Bengals defense is absolute garbage, so got to bench them. And then because Joe Burrow is returning, although the Ravens have value, I don't think they're terrible. I would just bench him. I don't want to play with fire. I don't want to trust them against Burrow. Burrow is a guy that can really burn you. Could get a negative, despite how well they've been playing. I would avoid Joe Burrow, but maybe they'll be more of a flex option. I might be ranking them a bit too low, but my thesis on them with no teams on bye this week against Burrow, I'm just going to bench the Ravens. If I can avoid it, I will. But that's it for the last game of Thanksgiving. We have one game left, and that is the Black Friday matchup. The Eagles are hosting Chicago in Philadelphia. The temperature might be a factor. It's going to be 43 degrees, so a bit cold and windy. 17 mile per hour winds, I think, is relevant enough to limit the passing game a little bit. So might be a little extra rush attempts in this matchup. I think that does benefit the Bears, believe it or not. They are a run-first team, and they know what they are. They do not move off of the run. I can't quite say that about the Eagles, because last week they were up 21-0, and Saquon barely had any rush attempts in the second half. He had way more targets, and that play calling made no sense to me. So we'll see what happens in this game, but typically I'm not expecting enough of a defensive output from the Bears to really worry about. If you look at the matchup for Jalen Hurts, it ranks tied for 11th best on the year. A lot of fantasy points given up by the Chicago Bears to fantasy quarterbacks this year. So Hurts had 2 rushing touchdowns. That's always going to keep him viable. Although he was coming off a couple stinkers in fantasy, last week he felt the pressure. He played pretty well. And even though the second half was atrociously bad, he did put up good enough points in the first half for it not to matter. So let's keep starting Hurts. I ranked him with a downgrade last week, and he proved me wrong. So I'll keep him back in the top 5. I don't think I'm going to be fading Jalen Hurts against Chicago. But Saquon Barkley scares me a little bit. If Saquon isn't scoring touchdowns, then now he's pretty dependent on receptions. Last week was a very strange usage rate for Saquon Barkley. When they had the lead, they should have gave him the rock much more in the run game. But I don't think I can bench Saquon. Even if I'm going to downgrade him, he'd still rank top 15. And against Chicago, it's a top 10 matchup on the year. Even in the last month, while they've gotten better, it's still pretty neutral and above average. So Saquon, a solid, reliable, high-end RB2 at worst, and odds are he is a lock in the lineup week in, week out. But I would like to acknowledge my trepidation on A.J. Brown this week. I still think you're starting him. I don't think I can bench him. The Bears matchup ranks top 10 on the year. However, last week, Jalen Johnson, their star cornerback, truly an elite corner, I would say top 5 in the NFL, did start practicing. He's been on IR since the beginning of the year, and he was limited all of last week. But he did not play, so there's a chance he won't play on Friday. But in my opinion, they were just saving him for this matchup. Given its slightly short rest, it would be harder to recover in time for the Friday game. So I expect Jalen Johnson to make his debut, and if that's the case, that's a significant red flag. That's some shadow coverage. I could see Jalen Johnson cover A.J. Brown all game long. He's that good, and sometimes he does do that. Odds are he mixes it up and doesn't cover him 100% of the time, but I don't think A.J. Brown will be better than Devontae Smith this week. I think Devontae will get the easier coverage, and the top 10 matchup is more applicable for Devontae if Jalen Johnson is going to play, because Jalen Johnson's no joke. I consider him a legit downgrade. I could see A.J. Brown fall into the flex rankings if Jalen Johnson is going to play. But odds are I won't worry that much. Odds are I'll still keep him top 20. And given the noise surrounding him, there's a lot of pressure to get him the ball. I expect him to get the targets to stay in your lineup and be worth it. So let's start both of them, but I will be ranking Devontae Smith above A.J. Brown as long as Jalen Johnson is active. And then the Eagles defense, I'm starting for sure. Have you watched them? They are insane. And even when they're facing off against good offenses, they put up good points with turnovers. They are playing lights out. If they make it back to the Super Bowl this year, it's on the back of their defense. That's why I still think they are not going to collapse and fall out of the playoffs. I expect them to still win the division, but it's on the back of their defense right now, not their offense. So against Chicago, an offense that doesn't always show up, sometimes is great, but sometimes really lackluster. Plus the wind factoring in, I'm going to trust the Eagles in my lineup, and I will start them. I will be ranking them top 10 this week. So start the Eagles defense, but also I'm going to start Dallas Goedert based on how the offense just works in Philly. I got to lean on Dallas Goedert. I'm still going to rank him top 10. I know he's very up and down, really hard to predict week to week, but the upside's been there at an elite rate at times. I would start him against Chicago, especially if Jalen Johnson does limit A.J. Brown at all. Then Hurts will have to look elsewhere, and Goedert is the next man up. That's not Devontae Smith. So let's go Goedert in the top 10. I think if you have any Eagle in the starting lineup this week, they're going to stay there, and I don't think I'm fading them. Their offense is just so consolidated. To these 5 names, I think you have to start them, and given how the Eagles are playing, they're also earning must-start status. So every Eagle is in my lineup, but based on how the Bears operate, I think every Bear is just a flex play. But Caleb Williams, no doubt, is going to get a downgrade here. The Eagles on the season, though, are an above-average matchup. As of late, I don't really trust them to be a big upgrade. So I know Dak played lights out in the second half, but not so much in the first. And I could see some turnovers from Caleb Williams. Sometimes he just plays so lights out. Other times he doesn't really contribute in the passing game. I'm expecting a bit more of a run-first attack, but I could be totally wrong. Maybe Caleb does play lights out. I think the Bears win. I think it's a weird game where you start all of the Eagles in fantasy, flex all of the Bears, have a hard time trusting them, and then somehow, some way, the Bears still eke out a win. Like, it feels counterintuitive to think the Bears are going to win based on how I'm positioning them on the board. But really, it's because of where I know the ball's going to go in Philly, as opposed to the randomness of Chicago. Ben Johnson does not have an allegiance to any one player in this offense. So that's why Caleb is risky. He's just a super flex play this week, not top 10 in my opinion. The Eagles scare me a bit, and if you tell me Caleb comes out of this game with a win and no touchdown passes, I wouldn't be shocked at all. It could be a very low scoring game, actually. I wouldn't be that shocked if that happened. So Caleb, not my safest start this week. Odds are I won't rank him top 12, but DeAndre Swift in a revenge game, very hard to trust. Last week, barely had any volume, and he was vultured again by Kyle Monangai, who had more touches. But I really don't know what to make of who the running back you want in Chicago is. I know they're a run-first team, and I know they're going to be giving the ball to both of them, but I really don't know where it's going in this game. I think it's going to be Swift because he's the guy that I've trusted more this year, but Monangai has really stepped up at times, but Monangai doesn't really catch passes either. So it's a toss-up. I think both are in the flex conversation, not top 20, going to be close in the rankings together, and I could argue that Monangai will be more valuable. But given it's a revenge game, I think Swift will play a little better, and I do think he's still the guy you'd rather have, but not by a lot. It is close between the two, and maybe Monangai steals the show yet again. But Odunze and DJ Moore are a big headache. Last week, Odunze was not as good as DJ Moore, and Moore is just so hard to trust, had such a low ceiling every week. The floor was also pretty disappointing, like 5-6 points, almost like clockwork for DJ Moore. And then last week he has 2 touchdowns out of nowhere, and maybe he's the guy you'd rather have, but I just don't know what to bet on in Chicago. So Ben Johnson does not give a fuck about your fantasy team, and while we do prefer Odunze, it is not as safe as it was back in September. Back in the beginning of the year, Odunze was money in the bank, top 10. Now I have no idea what you're getting from any of the Bears flex plays week in, week out. So I think I still prefer Odunze, but not a safe start, not going to rank in top 25. And DJ Moore, probably going to be back-to-back with Odunze this week. The matchup probably is worse against Quinyon Mitchell for Ramadunze, but my long shot for this matchup is Chicago's defense. I could see the Eagles offense shit the bed again. I mean, Dallas was productive. They gave up 21 points at halftime and then shut him out in the second. I could see the Bears step up, especially if Jalen Johnson does catch an interception and really locks up A.J. Brown. That's a difference maker that could revitalize this Bears defense. They have played well at times in the past, not so much this year, but at times they are okay. And last week in fantasy, they were all right. They gave me 8 points. I started them against the Steelers, and that's a decent floor. They are an interesting long shot, but the Eagles probably bounce back on offense inevitably, and overall the Bears defense isn't good enough this year to trust. So a long shot feels gross, but I don't trust the Eagles offense enough to completely rule out the Bears in my lineup. But odds are I'll bench him. However, Luther Burden, I think, is the only long shot I can think of. The Eagles don't have one. The Eagles don't have a deep enough offense to give you a long shot candidate. So let's go to Luther Burden, who is going to increase his role as the weeks go on. And although Zacchaeus plays a factor, Burden could catch a very deep touchdown at any time. And if you told me he has a house call, I could see that as one of the ways the Bears win this game. Burden is starting to emerge, and I liked him in best ball entering the year. I would never start him in season long, but in DFS, I do think he's an interesting option, given Quinyon Mitchell could lock up Odunze, and DJ Moore is just so hard to trust. So Caleb, I think, will have at least like one really deep pass, and if it goes to Burden over anyone else, wouldn't be shocked at all. So not going to start him, but who knows, could work out. I would have put Loveland as my long shot, but this matchup against Philly is terrible. Ranks bottom 3 for the tight end position against Philadelphia. So Loveland, no thank you. I do prefer him over Cole Kmet. I think there's more upside with Loveland. He scored a touchdown last week, but really hard to trust. And Kmet hasn't fully gone away. So in this matchup, let's bench both of them. Loveland, a good bench stash, but this week, let's keep him on the bench. And then lastly, Zacchaeus for the Bears, not a safe start. Sometimes he's the guy instead of Burden, but I'd rather take a shot on Burden. If I was that desperate, I'd avoid Olamide Zacchaeus. But the backups behind Saquon still irrelevant. Bigsby is the more valuable one, the one I would consider rostering if I was going to handcuff Saquon, but Shipley not contributing either, and then Dillon is an afterthought. Bigsby is the only one getting any volume, and it's not enough to start in fantasy. So no thanks there. And then Jahan Dotson not getting more than like 3 targets in like any game, basically. So let's avoid Jahan Dotson. Unless AJ Brown goes down, Dotson has never had value this year. So that is it for this video. Those are the 4 games on Thanksgiving and Black Friday. Those are my start sit decisions for those 4 games. So look out tomorrow for all of my start sit calls on Sunday and Monday. We have a lot of games this week. No teams are on bye, and wanted to get out these games early, given they're much sooner in the week. So look out for that video tomorrow. If you don't want to miss out, ring the notification bell so you don't miss out anytime I post new content, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Like the video on your way out, and I'll see you next time. I'm Adam Riancho, and thanks for watching. Nice and blunt.